So this is the Saturn V. The Saturn V, so Wernher von Braun, who we'll talk about more, he named most of his rockets that he designed after planets. So there was the Jupiter rocket, and then there's the Saturn, the Mercury rocket. So
how many of those are there?
Well, what?
You said the Mercury, you know, the Mercury and all the other ones. Like what was the, like how many Mercuries were there?
There were, well, so the Saturn V, it's not that the Saturn V was the fifth Saturn. It was called the Saturn V because it had 5 first stage engines. Okay, so we have the Saturn V. So here's the first stage, right? So the bottom stage, this is uses a liquid. So the entirety of the Saturn V rocket used liquid engines, okay? It had 5 first stage liquid engines. It also had 5 second stage liquid engines. They were smaller. The third stage had a single liquid engine. So this was a 3-stage launch vehicle. The payload was the Apollo spacecraft and lunar lander. It was actually quite complex. We'll get into more detail about it. I'm going to bring my Lego model of the Saturn V rocket next time, and you'll get to look at it and look at the staging and how it was built and so forth. It's actually phenomenally accurate for a Lego model. It's really cool. All right. Yeah, it's a fantastic view, right? So we have 3 stages, 1, 2, 3. So first stage, second stage, third stage. The payload is up here. So this little tiny triangle in the top, little itty bitty tiny triangle. Wait, what? Yeah, each stage has its own fuel tanks, and its own fuel and its own boosters. This little tiny thing at the very top, this little triangle, is where the astronauts were. And this was about the size of a small bedroom. Okay? So just for reference, this like black thing right here is about the size of a person, that arrow. Okay? One of the engines, so it's called the F1. You don't need to know that. F1 engine. No, not F. No, I don't want F1 like cars rocket. All right. So here is a picture of a person in relation to one of the engines at the bottom of the Saturn V.
They're dead now.
That person? Probably. Picture was probably taken in the 60s. Okay, these were enormous, truly gigantic engines. Yeah. Yes, it would. This is the largest single chamber rocket engine ever built. They were unbelievably powerful. Okay, so the Saturn V had 3 stages plus the payload, right? The Apollo spacecraft had its own rocket engine as well as the lander had its own rocket engine. So there was a lot of rocket engines, okay? And a lot of fuel. So this rocket was primarily fuel. If you want to launch something into space, you're going to see that a lot of the rocket is dedicated to just fuel tanks because it takes a lot of fuel to get into space. All right? So let's look at another example of a rocket that's used right now and look at the staging of it, okay? So the Ariane 5. Okay, the Ariane 5.
How much fuel did it take to launch off the moon?
To get off the moon, not a lot. The moon is much smaller than the Earth, so the gravity's lower. And actually, the biggest reason why it doesn't take as much is because there's no atmosphere. The atmosphere is the primary problem. It's like trying to swim really fast through water, right? Water is very dense. Well, to a rocket, air is extremely dense too. Okay, so the Ariane 5 is a rocket that uses a first stage, a second, you can see the second stage rocket right here, and then 2 strap-on solid rocket boosters. And it is a beautiful rocket, in my opinion. It's very elegant. Yeah. So here's the liquid rocket main first stage engine, 2 solid rocket side boosters, and then up here you have the fairing and the payloads in the fairing, right? This is a very cool, very beautiful rocket. Okay. So it is beefy. It's very robust. Okay. So what we're going to do is I am going to have you do an assignment where you are going to research a modern launch vehicle. And I'm going to give you a list of different launch vehicles that are used. We're not going to look at any that use that can carry people. We'll talk about human space flight at a different time. But I'm going to give you a list. And for those of you who are watching at home, the list is in the Canvas assignment. You can find it there. Okay? So like and subscribe.